We're expecting this to be kind of interesting and a lot of good info to cover. Just, not that these guys need any introductions, but just a quick introduction so everybody knows who's who. We have Coach Joe McFadden from class 69, sitting closest to me. Coach was the head lacrosse coach here from 84 to 99 and is currently an assistant on the varsity. Next to Coach McFadden, we have Mr. Joe Brune, the head football coach from 1967 to 2001. Next to him, we have Coach Jerry Savage, who was the head basketball coach from 68 to 02. Mr. John Stewart was the head lacrosse coach from 1970 to 1981, and was the assistant football coach, from 67 to 77-ish, right there, Coach? And then on the end there, we have Mr. Bill Korrow, who is the behind-the-scenes guy. He's been the assistant coach for virtually everything under the sun, but primarily football and wrestling for a long time, and we welcome all them here. Our special guest host tonight, guys, cut his teeth covering the Baltimore Orioles for the hometown Baltimore Sun. He spent 10 years covering the Washington Redskins for the Washington Post. After that, he made the jump to TV and worked at the NFL Network for 3 years and did a lot of work on a variety of their shows there. And he's currently the NFL insider for CBSSports.com and the NFL Today on CBS. So please join me in welcoming from the class of 1992, Mr. Jason Canfora.
Thanks, glad everyone showed up. Again, hopefully we get more people coming in. The extent of my athletic contributions to Loyola, I believe, were maybe 7 goals in ice hockey over the course of 2 seasons. They were all garbage goals, and I don't think anything was scored outside the crease. So I'm a little out of my element here with these guys, but again, just thankful to be here. It's always great to be back on campus. Hopefully we just keep everything conversational, guys. I'm sure some coach may say something that triggers a memory. Feel free to fight each other for the microphones and chime in wherever. But I just thought we'd get it started by maybe you guys talking a little bit about how you came to Loyola. Maybe there were some central figures who may have touched all you guys, brought you onto campus, got you guys involved in the athletic program, and started this vocation that you guys have been on working with young men here.
Thank you, John. I didn't even know where Loyola High School was. I went to Towson University to become a teacher, and since it was right around the corner, my father-in-law graduated in 1943, and he said there was a job over here. I came over, I met Mr. Bob Keller, and he hired me for the history department. Then I had to go and meet Mr. Brune, which was actually a little bit intimidating at the time for me, but it all worked out. And I started coaching freshman football and JV baseball that year, and then got in wrestling, and then behind the scenes was that I became the trainer for about 25 years. So helping out, and most of the coaches enjoyed that because that meant they didn't have to tape ankles.
First, I needed a job. I got out of the Army, and a buddy of mine was coaching at Calvert Hall. I was coaching lacrosse. He said he needed a JV coach. And Brother Andrew said, I'll give you $300 to coach JV. And I said, keep it. I just enjoy coaching. And then Father Carboy gave me a call, and he said, there's a young guy named Joe Brune coming here to coach football, and he's going to want an assistant. And our lacrosse coach left. He said, would you be interested in coming to Loyola? Absolutely. Okay, I'll be there as soon as I can. So from Calvert Hall to Loyola was an easy jump.
I graduated from Mount St. Mary's in 1961, and from there I taught at Mount St. Joe for 7 years, from 1961 when I graduated to 1968. And during that time I coached the JV at Mount St. Joe. Of course, we played Loyola all the time, and I was very thankful that Mr. Hargenen had asked me if I was interested in the job, and I said yes I was, and I came over, and fortunately I was hired. And I pointed out that between Mr. Hargenen and myself, he was here 26 years and I was here 35 years, so for 61 years there were only 2 coaches at Loyola. But it was a great job, and I was very fortunate to be here.
when I graduated from Bucknell University in '56 with an economics degree, the one thing I knew is that I didn't want to do anything in economics. I went into service for 2 years through the ROTC, came out, and somehow while I was in the Army, I got the idea that I'd like to teach English and perhaps coach. And I came out here to talk to Mr. Hargan and told him I'd like to get into coaching. And he's a good guy, you don't want to come here. The Jesuits don't pay any money. You know, they take the money and run with it. My football coach at Bucknell was Harry Lawrence, and he was a counselor at City College. And so I talked to him, and he pulled some strings and got me a job at City College, where I started teaching and coaching. I was very fortunate at that time. The city had great athletic teams and great coaches, and I learned a lot while I was there. And eventually a job opened up here at Loyola. I wasn't really that interested in it because the city was a great place to work and teach. Tim Pierce had been at City for several years and had come here as a swimming coach in '66, I believe it was. And he said, Joe, I want you to go out and talk to the people at Loyola. And I said, Tim, I'm really not interested. Plus the fact that all the kids I got, I can't take a pay cut or anything like that. He kept persisting and introduced me to Father Schmidt. And Father Schmidt was the prefect of discipline at that time. Very persuasive individual. And eventually told me, you know, that this is what the job that I would take. So that's how I came here. And the interesting thing about it is that Father Schmidt was the one that recommended John Stewart to me, and Father Schmidt was the one that recommended Bill Korrow to me. I can still remember seeing Bill in the entrance to Xavier Hall with Father Schmidt. And Father Schmidt said, here, this guy's a friend of ours, you ought to hire him. So that's how I got here.
After graduating from here, I went up and played at Villanova, which was an unfunded program at the time. What that means is we carried all the equipment out, carried it back in the end of the day. But it was neat because we all lived together. We all had just real close relationships beyond just lacrosse. So I came down, and after graduation, I played a year of club ball and hated it. It's half the team shows up on Tuesday practice, half shows up on Thursday practice. You go play Saturday, just no relationship. I said I'd rather get more out of it. So ended up at Lutherville, 13-14. Oddly, no kids yet. You know, who today doesn't have parents coaching their kids in rec ball. I just did it because it was fun, and I felt closer to it. Did that until I was sitting out on the front porch one day, and a JV coach from here, Franny Mayer, drove by and hollered out. He said, I just got a job. I'm leaving Loyola. I don't know if it was directly to Hopkins or up to Union, up on the Canadian border. But they said, you ought to go talk to him if you think you want to take the JV. So I talked to Coach Stewart and took the JV in '79. When he stopped in '82, came out of the classroom, became the dean. His assistant, Steve DiBaggio, took the job and asked me if I'd hook up with him. And we did it for 2 years, and then he went off into the private world, and I took the varsity then in '84.
Jason, Joe Brune mentioned twice, he mentioned something about the Jesuits and their pay scale.
Yeah.
Do you remember what we got for a bonus at Christmas in '67? It was $50. Are you kidding? $50. That was like a fortune. That was like half your salary. We got free drinks, too.
Was that a particularly successful season, or why do you
This was for the faculty. Of course, we didn't have too many late persons on the faculty at that time. I think Joe and I, Tim Pierce, and just a couple others. Just tag on that real quick. We used to get a full course dinner every day, remember? At lunch, we used to eat with the Jesuits, and everything from soup to nuts in the dining hall up here. Campus pretty much shut down, but that was one of the perks of the job, and you know, I was single at the time. It was like no food bills, right?
Now, when did they cut that out? When did that perk disappear?
Well, it gradually evolved into hot dogs and beans, from stuffed pork chops and crab soup. Went down to pork and beans. Were you still here?
More and more lay faculty members.
That's right.
So sometime during the revolutionary years of the 70s. Anybody here from the 70s? I thought Mr. Holt, right? Okay, we got a few, right? The revolution.
Now,
Sociology.
did all you guys, was this always in your blood? Was it something that you just kind of recognized at an early age? And as well, I've had the privilege of covering a lot of great coaches, and the word they always use, they don't really even refer to them as coaches, it's always teach. I mean, whether it was Scotty Norman or Bill Belichick, the first word always out of their mouth is teach. And I'm guessing for you guys, those two concepts are just completely intertwined.
Well, speaking for these guys, I mean, knowing these guys, teaching absolutely, but the fierce competitive nature of the guys sitting up here, not necessarily a competitive nature to win, but the competitive nature to get the most you could out of every guy on your team and get them to play together. But, you know, knowing all the guys up here, that's pretty much what we went through in the 70s and these guys long after that. So watching them coach, when Joe stopped in 01 and Jerry in 02, I saw the same fierce competitive nature that I saw back in the 60s. So the passion for the game and teaching young guys to play right, play hard.
Well, actually, as I said, I had gotten fascinated with literature when I was in the Army. Had a lot of time to read. I wasn't doing a whole lot, but taking up space. And I thought, well, that'd be great to go someplace and talk about great books and literature and so forth. Went off to City College, and the first thing I had to do was teach Silas Marner. I don't know whether any of you ever read Silas Marner, but that's got to be one of the most boring books I've read, as far as I was concerned. But at any rate, when this job here opened up, one of the things that impressed me is that Father Carboy, who was the principal at that time, said, I'd like you to teach 2 AP English classes. And I thought, oh man, I'm in heaven. So my first year I was teaching 5 classes, 3 standard senior English classes and 2 AP classes. Coaching the football team and the lacrosse team. And I loved every minute of it. It was easy because when I was in the city, we had over 3,500 students, and we were on what was called a double shift. One group of students would come until 12 o'clock, and then another group, the older kids would come in after 12 o'clock and go to 3 o'clock. And at that time, I would get up at 7 o'clock and go coach the JV football team until about 8:30, a quick change, run upstairs, teach 2 classes, eat lunch, teach 3 more classes, and coach the varsity football team or help coach varsity. So, you know, coming here was great.
Well, I felt very fortunate that I was able to play basketball in college. I was not really a highly recruited basketball player, but I had a few choices, and I was fortunate that I went to Mount St. Mary's where I was able to play. But playing for my high school coach, Ed Lyons, was from Philadelphia, and my college coach, Jim Phelan, was from Philadelphia, and both of them were very good players. And I really got caught up in the game of basketball. And it was when I graduated from Mount St. Mary's that was kind of a desire of mine to be a high school varsity basketball coach. And I was very, very fortunate that, as I mentioned before about Mr. Hargan, but it is the competitive nature that you have. Why do you coach? And teaching is obviously a very big part of it. And you are a teacher first, and you are a coach after that. And somebody, I think, asked me, I think Frank Fisher said to me one time, well, what makes a good coach? And I said, good players. And we were very fortunate, especially during the 70s, to get a number of very good players. And as a result, I was a very good coach at that time. So.
I'm a bit of a different situation than the other four here because I've never been in a classroom as a teacher. I was working off campus selling sporting goods to institutional sales to schools, including Loyola. When the job situation here for lacrosse came up, I continued to be an off-campus coach from '79 until I became director of admissions in '85. And they said at the time they weren't looking for a teacher counselor, they were looking for someone that had been involved in the business world and marketing and go out and find guys. So admissions was 16 years, and then around 2001 it was shifted to registrar. So I spend my day in front of the computer just doing numbers. I do reports, I do schedules, everything is columns and rows. Kids ask, why I don't teach, and I said, well, probably our Ames accreditation would be in jeopardy because I have no teaching experience. But I do feel like the lacrosse part is. You're going out there, you're putting the plan in place. When things worked out for us in our opener against Gilman, some things we've been struggling with, I said this has to be, the way the math teacher feels when they've been hammering the same thing and the quizzes have all been lousy, and then suddenly they give a test and it looks like everybody's starting to get it. That's kind of where we were a week ago when we opened up the season. But I tell you, there's a little bit of selfish in it. And I tell the kids this, I don't get up in the morning in the spring and think, I just can't wait to go in there and sit at that computer and crunch numbers. When I wake up in the spring, I can't wait for 3 o'clock to go outside and hang out with a bunch of 18-year-old kids that are giggling and poking each other and know all the inside stories and are just having a blast. And to be able to hang with those kids kind of keeps you tuned in a little bit longer than if you didn't have the chance. And I tell them, I'm not sure you woke up this morning saying, I can't wait for that biology test today. I think you woke up waiting for 3 o'clock and getting out there on the field. Understand, there are things you have to do to get to that point. Okay, I got to do my job or I'm not around at 3. You got to do your biology test or you're not going to be allowed at 3. But the excitement of hanging out with high school kids as mine were growing up is just just a tremendous joy and far more valuable than pay or sitting up here behind a table after a lot of years. It still comes down to the kids every day.
You guys, your career span so long. Coach Stewart talked about the revolutionary 70s and society changed, times changed, norms changed. How did you guys evolve with the times? And I'm just imagining there were probably a lot of things you could have got away with in terms of discipline or maybe getting in the kid's face or from time to time things flare up. I'm guessing you probably had to adjust over time or we've kind of reached a point where some might say that things have gone maybe too far the other way. And I guess I was staring right at you, Coach Stewart, because I had a feeling you might have been the guy who had to change the most.
Let me go back to the revolution first. When people talk to me about our time here, the 70s were very, very interesting. And I think all of us here, Joe came towards the tail end of the 70s. We learned a great deal about ourselves during the 70s and how to adapt. Not necessarily change standards, but adapt to the kids. Because back then, You had to. And as the 70s waned and you came into the 80s, you know, we got almost like a different type of kid starting to come in to Loyola. Going back to the 70s in terms of change, we had a lot of fun. I mean, we didn't have that many guys on the football team when I was helping with Joe. And certainly we didn't have all that many on the lacrosse team, but I thought we had a great deal of fun and the kids enjoyed it. I just tell this quick story. Things you can't do today in schools. We had nicknames for everybody back then. Everybody had a nickname and everybody laughed and thought they were funny. One year, remember Joe, it was I think 77 or maybe, we put nicknames on the back of the jerseys. We went to play Calvert Hall, and instead of putting their names on, we let all the kids put their nicknames on the back of the jerseys. You know, kind of loosen them up. We did well in the game, we won the game against Calvert Hall, but they still remember that. They know the kids. So as you go through the decades, you know, your standards don't have to change, but you do have to learn about the kids of the time. And certainly the kids today are much different than the kids of the 70s or 80s. And we got great kids here at Loyola, believe me. Okay, I deal with them every day. Just to give you one example, you guys ever here in the 70s or 80s? I guess you remember the old calf, correct? I mean, how many of you can? Well, we don't even have proctors in the calf anymore. Okay, so just to give you an example of how times have changed and kids have changed. You know, they get up, they clean up, and go about their business. So it's very interesting over the 40, 50 years we've been here, but let's let Bill go.
I would say, you know, I came here, I was right out of college, just starting 3 classes of Greek and Roman history, phasing Latin out, that's what they told me, 2 American history. And there were a lot of things going on that I really wasn't aware of because I was just preparing for my class, for the kids, and coaching football. You know, and that's all I was really interested in. John, I think he has a little bit more information about how stable the school was at that time. All right, when the dress code changed, I had boys in class that were in shirts, ties, coats. And the freshmen, I'm not sure what they were wearing. Whatever they wanted. Joey, okay? They kind of picked their own. But, you know, I was busy in the classroom, and I think there were a lot of people that were. And we were just trying to help the kids in their attempt to learn where they were going.
A lot of us had blinders on. We used to go from the classroom to the athletic field and kind of not look on the sides thinking, this too will pass.
I think one of the biggest changes as far as athletics are concerned today is that the athlete today seems to pick out a sport at an early age, and they end up playing that sport regardless of what the season is. They can play, say, lacrosse, they can play it year-round, they have all kinds of AAU teams and whatever. And whereas I grew up, obviously, in most of those in that time where you had football in the fall, you had basketball in the winter, and you had baseball in the spring. And there wasn't really too much deviation from that, and you look forward to the change in the seasons, really. But today, I think specialization has really kind of hindered the student, the athlete, in the fact that sometimes the sport that they get hooked up in is not really their best sport if they play the others. And I do think that we see that more and more now. And I know more pressure is put on kids today from parents to get a scholarship, somehow, you know, to be good enough, and they have to hire a trainer and have year-round, you know, participation. It's tough now. I think it's tough on the kids.
When you talk about change, my second year here at 69, quarterback was Bill Wagner. And I had come from a system where, you know, the coach calls the play, sends it in with the guard, tells the quarterback to play, and off we go. So I can remember distinctly, I don't know who we were, I think we might have been playing Gonzaga or something, we're down, going towards the street, and I called play, and play goes for a touchdown, but Wagner comes out and I said, hey, what play did I give you? And he told me what play. I said, well, you didn't call it. He said, my play was better, scored a touchdown. That's when I started to say, I'm working with a different bunch of guys here, and I better start to keep my ears open. I didn't always listen as well as I should have, but that was the first lesson I got from Bill. And interestingly, he loved basketball.
Yes, yes.
But he could have been a great college quarterback.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Bill Wagner. Of course, that was a classmate and a teammate of Mike Creaney, but that first year I was here, Bill was on the team. Like Coach said, he was the quarterback in football, and then he was our starter in basketball, and then he was my catcher in baseball. I coached baseball the first year I was here. And of course, Mike was Prep Athlete of the Year, having played football, basketball, and baseball, and very, very good at all three. And I can't imagine, you know, either one of those students, you know, playing just one sport, and it takes a lot away from it. But that whole thing of the students and not playing a particular sport. The first year I was here in '69, Mike's senior year and Wagner's senior year, I believe of the 12 players that were on the team, 7 of them were football players. I said, oh my goodness. And after Thanksgiving, we played the next week, and it was tough. But down through the years, I can say honestly, and I don't know whether Joe can back me up on that, but I never ever would try to say to a kid, no, don't play football, you might get hurt or whatever. It's just, you know, you can get hurt doing almost anything. So you want to encourage a student. If you want to go out, you're only here in high school once, go play that sport that you want to play. And I think that's a very important thing now.
Yeah, just a thought about the multi-sport guys. During the 80s, John had an 80 championship, and then between 83 and 90, we won 6 out of 8 of them. And some of that was just on the back of football players. There were 2 families in particular, the Welshes and the Hawses. 3 boys each, and just dominant players from football season. I think a couple of them made it, you know, the Welshes dabbled with some basketball, but, you know, certainly football into lacrosse in the spring. The hallmark of all those 80 teams were tough, the lacrosse teams. Really, really physical, really strong defense, and an awful lot of those defenders had a football background of knowing how, one, to deliver a hit. Of course, the game was different back then. You can't do today, given the concussions, what was done back then. But, you know, not only being able to deliver a hit, but also how to take a hit. You know, when you get a one-sport lacrosse player, sometimes they really get flustered when an athlete jacks them up. They don't know how to handle hitting the dirt, you know, or hitting the artificial turf now. You know, there's always room for, you know, the soccer players out there in the midfield. They get great vision. They know how to cover end to end. You know, football's kind of, the whistle blows, you got to own 3 yards where the soccer players see the big picture. But I tell you, if I'm putting defense together, I love football defenders out there that, again, like I say, know how to receive a hit almost as much as know how to deliver one. And we've had an awfully strong record of those football players going on being great college lacrosse players because of the physicality that they learn being multi-sport guys.
Would you guys agree with Coach Savage that it seems to be parent-driven, why we're getting into these year-round travel teams and specialization before these kids are even in middle school? Driven by the parents?
I think it's driven by money too. People make a lot of money. I would just say what Joe said. Back in '74, Joe Brune and I were coaching the lacrosse team in '74, and the pickings were kind of thin. We didn't have, like I said, we didn't have a whole lot of guys. We got a very good basketball player to play. Robbie O'Connor came and played lacrosse that year. We stole a catcher from the baseball team to come and be a very good athlete, come and play defense for us. Bobby Selby, he quit after the first game. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you real quick. But anyway, Pete Langler was a midi, a great football player for Joe. Very quick, very agile. We got him to face off, taught him that. That's it. All you got to do is face off back in '74, and you get the ball and get it for us. Mike Cook was athlete of the year. We stole him from baseball. And anyway, that's some good kids were playing different sports. We got them, transfer from this, do that, come and have fun with us. It's real quick. Bobby Selby was a very good basketball player for Jerry. Very good basketball player. Tall kid. I said, hey Bobby, why don't you come and play lacrosse? So we were playing this team from California, this Novato team, Novato. They were from the San Francisco area. They were more of a motorcycle gang type guy than a preppy lacrosse team. So they come in from California to play us in preseason. And Bobby was trying out for the team. Tall, what was he, about 6'5"? So we gave him a stick that was about another 6 feet tall and said, when you go in, you're going to play on the crease, okay? All you got to do is bat at the ball, right? So we're playing this team, long story short, playing UMBC. Bobby goes in. Towards the end of the game, we were beating him. He goes in and jumps up and slaps one in, jumps up, slaps another one in, came off the field. I said, hey, Bob, you did a good job, man. We'll see you practice Tuesday. He says, Mr. Stewart, I've done everything I can in this game. I said, I think I'm going to hang it up.
About the parents, I think it was maybe the second or third home game after I was here. I went to Father Schmidt. He usually used to take it. I said, Father, we got to build an iron railing around this bench area. And he said, well, why is that? He said, because I'm talking to the quarterback or I'm talking to a lineman, and some father is in between the two of us. I said, we need a railing to keep them back off the bench. So even in those days, parents were very involved in what was going on. I think the difference today is, as John said, they're all looking for a scholarship, and that's driving things these days. We didn't have to put up with that, and quite honestly, we didn't have that many scholarship guys playing for us in those days.
Guys, what's in? No, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was going to say, you guys have mentioned some of the standout athletes and guys you love to coach. Were there certain players or teams maybe that weren't championship teams, or just guys that kind of stole your heart, like these? Think of the movie Brune. Did you have certain kids who you just felt like, that kid gave us beyond every ounce of what he had, and maybe I kind of helped bring it out of him a little bit?
Let me start with that one, because back in the early days of football, I'll tell you, we had a kid on the team. Joe would remember this kid, Mark Tolheimer. He never played. He was on. What we tried to do was motivate these guys on the second team. We only had 2 teams, so we said, let's try to motivate them to give it all in practice. So one year we started this thing. We called these kids the Red Rats, and I don't know why we said red, but we called them Rats, which is star spelled backwards. And to motivate them to practice, I had a Girl Scout beanie, a green one, and they thought it was a Green Beret from my Army days. So what we did with that, we said the toughest guy at practice for this week's practice, the toughest guy gets to wear this hat around school all week next week. Okay, and this guy Mark Tolheimer, he would go out and die for it every day at practice, fighting guys. So he
Wearing
could,
the glass.
he would wear it to class, right? So remember him? And he never played any games. He was pretty slow, but guys like that stick out. We always have guys like that on the team who don't get a whole lot of playing time, but just come out and give it their all. And that's what we're looking for with kids. Just come out and give it your best. And we had quite a few. Joe, you remember any?
There's one right over there.
Who's that?
Frank Starsky.
Oh, Frank Starsky. Come here, Frank. Stand up a minute, Frank, please. Frank. Yeah. Okay. You see Mike Creedy up there, right?
I saw him earlier, yeah.
Okay, Frank Starsky was a starting tackle for us, okay? And what was significant about Frank is, back then we would say, okay, you gotta stick your face in that guy's gut when you block him. Well, we had cheap helmets at that time, and Frank's helmet would always come down and cut him across the bridge of his nose. And he wears those glasses today because he's still bearing the scars from 1969.
And these help camouflage the scar better than wire rims.
How much did you weigh back then in 68, 69, 67, 68?
Well, I probably started at 180 something and finished around 170.
Okay, and the guard playing next to you was a guy named Carl Glazer. What do you think he weighed?
Oh, Carl Glazer was in the 150 range.
Okay, so here's the thing. Joe Brune could never understand. He used to ask me, why can't these guys block that guy from Poly who's 280? If you teach them the right technique, they'll be able to block him, And Joe, the laws of physics apply somewhere.
Stick your face in there. That was the rule. That was our copy technique.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that question. Just last week, Chris Fallon, who was an assistant with me in 2000 or 99 or so, out of the blue, he calls me and he says, "Whatever happened to James McSeany?" I said, "What in the world?" James McSeany weighed like 150 soaking wet. He was one of our defensive ends. And he was the kind of guy that would go out there and never miss a practice, never complain about everything. He's now a wine merchant or something, growing wine out in California. But Chris would just happen to think of him and say, hey, there's a guy that's kind of like the epitome of loyal athlete. Go out there every day, work hard, get banged around, and never complain, and just love every minute of it. So he'd be another guy that I would think about.
One fellow that comes to mind actually is the dad of a fellow that just graduated this last year. The dad's Jeff Jackson. His son played on the championship team last year for us, Kevin. And I was at a dinner for Jeff 2 years ago, and he got up to tell a story that I actually, didn't know completely. He talked about how when he was a freshman here, and this was '81, so I was the JV coach, his dad was pushing him to go try out for lacrosse. He's a soccer guy, he played a little baseball. His dad said, try lacrosse, you'll like it, it'll be good for you in your other sports. Never played before, so they borrowed some equipment from somebody and gave it to him. And to try out at Loyola, having never played the game before, it takes a lot of courage in the first place. And the story he tells is that one of my relatives ran into one of his relatives as the decisions were about to be made, and that I had said, there's no way I'm cutting that kid as hard as he plays. He can't catch, he can't throw, but he just plays like a maniac, loves the game, and we're gonna keep him around. So he did that for the JV, and by sophomore year, he sometimes caught the ball for the JV. So he comes up junior year, and the families I mentioned, our '83 and '84 squad that won back-to-back, our first midfield line was a prep athlete of the year, Pat Welsh. The face-off, the kind of defensive guy, was Kevin Hawes. Two really strong lacrosse families, two strong individuals. And the wingman for those two guys was Jeff Jackson. Well, Kevin, as I said, was athlete of the year. Pat Welch was athlete of the year. Kevin Hall is his first team, all Maryland. And when I was done, I told both those guys, you owe a debt of gratitude to this kid Jackson, who just made you look so good, because he did everything to get you the ball. Well, those stars go down to Carolina and win a title down at Carolina together. Jeff Jackson goes to Hampton-Sydney. And while at Hampton-Sydney, he's the ODEC, or I guess that was the conference, Rookie of the Year. He's a 3-time All-American at Hampton-Sydney. And I guarantee you, the only Hampton-Sydney lacrosse player to make the U.S. World Team and go out and compete against Canada and Australia and the others. So anyway, this was a story he told, a kid that couldn't catch and throw, who's representing the U.S. following his college career. And the setting for this story was his induction into the Hall of Fame here in Baltimore. So how do you not love that kid and that story, who spit out a young son that comes up, shows the same work ethic and the same tenacity, and son is now the D3 player of the week, having played real well for Roanoke down there.
I was just going to mention about, can you hear me? Okay. I was going to mention about our 97 team, which was the last team we had that won an MIA championship. And one of the players on our team was Carlos Somariba. And Carlos just loved the game of basketball. He played it all the time. And between his junior and senior year, he just worked and worked and worked and built himself up. And I can remember going to a summer league game with him, taking him down to the Dome down in East Baltimore, and him telling me, oh, we're going to win this league and we're going to do this. And I said, Carlos, you don't understand. But anyway, so we get down in our season to the very last game, and we're playing Calvert Hall here at Blakefield, and we are tied with them. And back then, they didn't have a playoff, so the winner of that game was going to be the MIA champion. And I think Dixon won. Dixon was on the Calvert Hall team, and they had lost to St. Joe earlier when Dixon showed up late for the game or whatever. But anyway, and then we had lost to Calvert Hall at Calvert Hall, so we were tied going into this game. And we hung right in there with them, and to make a long game short, we were down 5 points with 17 seconds to go. And we had the ball and bringing up the court, and Calvert Hall fortunately fouled, I think, Ryan Heacock, and he hit 2 free throws to cut it to 3. And then we were pressing, and we fouled right away, and the Calvert Hall player went down and shot a free throw and missed it. And they pushed Chris Malone on the rebound, so he walked down the other end and hit 2 free throws and cut it to 1. And so there wasn't a whole lot of time. It was only about, I guess at that point, maybe 12 seconds. But we fouled again, and Calvert Hall missed a free throw again, and we got the rebound, and Brian Cosgrove called the timeout. And we got Brian to bring the ball up the floor, and I said, just get it up the floor, and then we'll try to get a real good shot if you can get it up, because Reggie Gray had fouled out, and we really were going to have a tough time getting it up the floor against Calvert Hall's guards. But anyway, he brought it up, he stopped and turned, and there's Ryan Heacock right at the top of the key, and he let it fly, and the buzzer went off, and the shot went in, and we won by 2, and it was a shot heard round Bruxton. The place exploded, and we won the championship. But Carlos was the leading scorer in that game, and he told me we were going to win the championship, and I had a hard time, but I certainly had to believe that one, so it was great.
I want Bill Korrow to tell you a little bit about Tough Kids. We had a thing here called the Bite the Bullet Club. And to get membership to the Bite the Bullet Club back in those days, you didn't go into the training room. You bit the bullet. And Bill Korrow, we had a sign. Kids were dying to get in. Say they were dying to get into the Bite the Bullet Club. So we only had a small, tiny little training room. And the fewer times they came in, or did they come in at all? Let Bill tell you about some of these guys. But it was the poster's still around somewhere, isn't it?
I still have the poster. When I came here in 1970, Doc Castagna was the team doctor, and he visited game days, and he was very good. He was a big help. Nobody else seemed to have much of an interest in the athletic training. I did. Mr. Savage did a lot of taping, but we didn't have many guys in the training room. All right, Coach Hall's up there. After about 25 years, we did get a full-time trainer, and it really is a good thing. The trainer we have does an excellent job, but when you have a trainer, you have more injuries. All right? Now, I was very limited. I was coaching at the time, and we were very limited in our supplies. I had to tell Mr. Savage right away. I said, we got to get some tape. I was working with these green canisters. I think were from World War II surplus that they sent here for the Jets. Okay, but so I mean, we had a whirlpool, and we had me, all right, and those guys that were hurt came in, but I was very stingy with tape. So the first thing they didn't come in and explain to me what was the matter. I said, what is the matter? Now I'm not wasting tape. All right, go on. I don't have time. That's it. And it worked. It worked for some of them, all right, that they went at it. We didn't have anybody that was really injured, okay? We eventually got working with Mr. John Lopez, who would have come over for some serious injuries. Now, I had a variety of doctors that I worked with. One of my favorites was Doc Fitzpatrick, Dr. Fitzdad. And he had his office down on St. Paul Street. And he was an OBGYN. But I'd have guys that I could call Doc and say, I have somebody I need you to look at. We would go down to his office. I would make sure I sat opposite the door so that these ladies would come in and they'd open the door and they're looking at me with 2 or 3 boys. That guy did read the sign. But he would look at anybody that we had a problem with. Okay, we had anesthesiologist, Dr. Hobelman, at one time was the team physician. But we didn't have, I don't think, quite as many boys injured or missing practice at the time. And they didn't expect it. If I told them to go ahead on back out there, for the most part, they went back out there and continued.
The doctors back then, Doc Fitz was very generous with his time. Doc Castagna is an institution here for a lot of us who coached but played here. Was he here when you were playing, Joe? One day we had a game at McDonough. I was a senior. We were playing in a monsoon over at McDonough. It's 1959, and we had a running back named Henry Blaha who was injured. So Henry's cheek was cut right here, kind of sliced open. None of the face masks were like pretty slim. Anyway, I'm sitting there at the halftime watching Doc Castagna take a dirty towel and wipe his face, and then took a needle and sewed his cheek up. I said, that's the way it was back then, it was like you go back in the game.
Well, Coach Korrow, I'm interested to see, you worked with all these guys. I was wondering if there were certain things about them that resonated with you, certain things that kind of made them unique or different in their style of coaching, and then maybe you guys could comment on what helped Coach Korrow was and all the things he did sort of behind the scenes to help make things go.
Bill was a go-to coach, okay? But we needed a coach, it was Bill, whether it was football, baseball, wrestling. Bill did it all. And in addition to, his training and being here all summer and taking care of kids, Bill did it all.
I was just really pleased to be here. As I said, I knew nothing about Loyola High School. And as close as I was, I went to Towson University and went back home to Hamilton each day. Never ventured over to Charles Street, all right? But it's just been tremendous, and it was great for me to have the opportunity to work with these coaches as I came here. Because they taught me so much about teaching, you know, whether in the classroom or on the field. All right.
Forgive me if this one is silly, but was there ever a time for any of you guys where Calvert Hall wasn't the primary rival, maybe just because the ebbs and flows, you were facing another team in the playoffs all the time? Or, I mean, is it ever a time where it wasn't all about Loyola Calvert Hall?
I don't think anybody from Loyola likes Gilman. No matter what the sport is, we don't like nothing. Love beating them. And then when Coach Working was at McDonough and at St. Joe, we didn't have a love relationship with his teams either. Developed into a kind of rivalry, but Gilman approaches the Calvert Hall rivalry.
I'd say in football, lacrosse, I think the Calvert Hall thing, but you know, going back, and most of the kids that came here came from parochial schools, and back then there was only a couple schools you'd go to. Loyola and Calvert Hall were separated downtown by a couple blocks, and Loyola moved out here in '34. It wasn't until Calvert Hall moved out here in 1960. But the kids all went to parochial schools together, and the choices were Loyola or Calvert Hall, or take the number 8 streetcar and go to the other end of town and go to St. Joe. So yeah, the neighborhood rivalries and your buddies and, you know, bragging rights were in roots. It was always Loyola Calvert Hall.
The lacrosse might be a little bit different because of the closeness and the strength of the lacrosse programs around here. When I started here, I mean, we were just getting clubbed by the Gilmans and the St. Pauls and the BLs, to the point where my sophomore and junior year, we played B conference, kind of regrouped a little bit. I mean, Friends back then was a tremendous program. So we could hang with Calvert Hall, but we had a heck of a time with the kids that were playing since first grade at BL and Gilman and schools like McDonough and so forth. So then when I came back and started coaching, we really had a kind of a rivalry with BL. I think BL's the team that you guys got in the mid-'70s, John. Calvert Hall was the team in 1980, but we were going head-to-head with BL an awful lot through the early mid-'80s. It turned a little bit. Calvert Hall got a good collection, and we got back to a great Loyola Calvert Hall rivalry in the late 80s. They had this fellow named Pelkey that went down to Virginia. He was an all-world player. Real good bunch. So for a couple, 3 years, it went back to a Loyola Calvert Hall, but quickly turned around. I would say in the lacrosse world, our kids get awfully excited about a BL matchup. Respect to Gilman and the St. Pauls, and then Calvert Hall is just because they're Calvert Hall. I mean, you know, as a graduate of Loyola, when I see red, I really see red, and I try to instill that in our kids who don't necessarily see that if their only experience is lacrosse. So I try to coach them up a little bit on what Loyola Calvert Hall is in the lacrosse world, or what it should be. Socially, they interact with everybody.
Along those lines, any particular favorite memories about Calvert Hall games or that rivalry, or things that happened on the field, off the field, what have you, in regards to the Hall?
One game in lacrosse that stands out, again, go back to the 70s. We were playing up here against like a couple all-world players. You guys all remember Whittlesburger, Kohler, and those guys. We sent the lacrosse world back a lot. We beat them 3-2. Wasn't a really fan-friendly game, but we won the game with some pretty good defense and a good goaltender. But that was a pretty big win for us that year against, I think they may have eventually gone on to win the title, but a couple of their guys went on to play major college and 3-time, 4-time All-Americans at Hopkins, I think. So, well, 3-2, we, I think on the first face-off, we sent the guy in to get their face-off guy out, to wipe him out. He missed. They scored. It was 1-0. Said, uh-oh, here we go. So they didn't score again until the end of the game. So.
Actually, the game that I guess at Calvert Hall, the Loyola game that I can remember most vividly is the second game we played, Creaney and Snarsky's here, when we beat them for the first time in I don't know how many years it's been. I can remember John jumping up in my arms right after the game. So I can remember that rather vividly. And you can ask Coach Hall back there about Calvert Hall. He had some words with the coaching staff at Calvert Hall when he was playing, and he hadn't forgotten whatever was said wasn't said pleasantly. And we nailed him pretty good in his senior year, so I remember that game. And then, of course, it was the field goal. Bill Korrow kicked the field goal. What year was that? 69. No, but 68. We beat him. They kicked field goal. 69, he kicked the field.
Okay, we lost in 67, beat them in 68. Field goal was the 5th anniversary game. So we lost by a field goal. That we were down 14-0 at halftime. We tied it up 14-14. We stopped them around midfield. No, they stopped us. You went for it on 4th down. They stopped us. Which we should have gone for it on 4th down. It was getting winding down the game, so they get one play off, and then they line up to kick a field goal. And we said, I mean, come on, this guy's 42, 44 yards. This guy's going to kick the ball. Well, he kicked it, and he made it. And he came back the next year, and he kicked, he was 0 for 3 from 20 yards out. So that was that was a tough loss, but great game.
After that game, when we got back to school after the holiday, I can recall a guy named Ernie Ketchum. I was in biology class. He started banging on the drums.
Yep.
And he started a rally, and everybody just cleared the biology class and followed him around the campus in the circle that was out here.
Yeah.
And we just had a big rally, and then all of a sudden somebody announced that everybody could go home for the day.
Do you remember Ernie Ketchum climbing that tree?
Yeah.
Ernie Ketchum climbed that tree, and he said he's not coming down until we get a holiday. So I don't know, Father Schmidt or somebody said go home.
Now, we haven't mentioned the swimming, but I've been talking with Mr. Pierce recently, and I wondered why Reds Huck disliked Loyola so much. Because I really only knew him as a swim coach. Carol Hall did a great job with their program. But I found out that Reds was the pool operator at Loyola High School, and we had a pool. And when Tim Pierce became the swim coach, he told whoever it was, the principal, that he had to control the water. Right? So Reds lost his job here as the pool operator, and Tim became the pool operator. And I know it was my introduction here when I went to swim meets. I mean, you couldn't get down into our pool. They set it up with chairs, or if you went to Calvert Hall, you had to get there early because of the kids and the parents and the rivalry there with the swimming. And I think it was in 1971, Tim was telling me, was the first year that we beat them in swimming. And it just so happens that tomorrow, the pool, the old pool, is being inducted into the Maryland Swimming Hall of Fame. The pool.
Yeah, Tim Pierce should really be up here with us. I think he's doing much better, but Tim was, we would all agree, the father of Loyola swimming. And he came here, Joe and I started teaching. Tim Pierce was here, 67. And we wish him well. He's been battling some issues.
Kind of spinning things forward a little bit. I'm sure you guys go to games now, or you're in the community, you see all these facilities and the way this campus has changed, and Calvert Hall, and sort of the arms race that's going on now. Could you have seen any of this coming? Does it blow your mind at all? Just sort of how athletics has grown, and the way these campuses have changed, and just the level of facilities that these kids have now versus how Spartan things were when you guys started.
I guess when we started, we thought it was pretty nice. It was, we had a nice gym.
Right.
But no, I think it starts off with one school building a huge building. I know McDonough has even gone beyond that now. You walk onto McDonough's campus, you don't even recognize it from just a few years ago. But I think each school felt like they just had to improve their facilities just to kind of stay up with everyone else. And as a result, you look around at Archbishop Spalding, at Mount St. Joe, at a number of these schools in the area that have really built up their facilities.
I'd agree with Jerry that we had a very good, I'm sitting in here and remembering during the first years that I was coaching here, I would have a football clinic for rec council coaches, hoping that some of their players would get interested in Loyola. And one year we had a windfall. We got a whole bunch of guys from Reisterstown. Pete Legler.
I wouldn't call that a windfall.
Pete Legler and
Kenny Brower.
Kenny Brower. Yeah, well, that's when I said, I don't know whether we're on the right track. Kenny Brower, I had to keep track of him night and day, that he wasn't going to get in trouble, and make sure he was passing all his classes and so forth.
Honestly, they were good guys, a lot of fun to be around, hard workers, but different breed.
Timmy Triddle left Triddle and went to Florida and became a lifeguard down there. He's been there the rest of his professional life.
He still is a lifeguard. Graduated in '75. He looks great. Just quick, Tim came up to a Hall of Fame dinner we had when Pat Welsh got in, and he came in, and he still had the long, flowing blonde hair, and had like a 22-year-old girl in his arm. Looked good.
But I'll say this too, with respect to Jerry. He didn't have to go look for players. Every good basketball player, father sent him here. Good example was Pete Butko. His father was a Baltimore Bullet. We didn't go looking for Pete Butko. Pete Butko's father said, "You want to play basketball? Play for Jerry Savage." And, who else did we have? There was Harrington, or what was it?
Tony Guy.
Yeah.
One day I was teaching Algebra 1, and this guy was sitting in the first row with his legs out, about 8 feet out. And I said, what's your name, son? He said, Tony Guy. I said, you know Mr. Savage? He said, no. He said, you will.
Yeah, well, Tony said to me, he said, I got an athletic scholarship to Mount St. Joe, and I got an academic scholarship to Loyola, so I went to Loyola. So that was his piece or whatever.
Going back to the locations, and you said coming here was so great and all. Well, when we played for you, we had to play at Towson Catholic, which was about this big. But the best place was City College, because you had to put, in order to play in the gym, you had to put your foot up against the wall to throw the ball in bounds on one side of the court. and we played, and it was very difficult in that gym.
Yeah, well, if you want to go way back, you should have seen the court downtown. They had pillars in the middle of the court. You don't think they really played there, did they?
That might have been Douglas. That might have been Douglas, because I think Douglas had a pillar.
Yeah,
We played Douglas.
yeah, we played in the Old Poly, and we played in a number of different places, with, which were not very good. But, I can remember my old high school gym back in East Orange. I went to Clifford Scott High School in East Orange, New Jersey, and it was a very small court. In fact, the opposite foul line was the back court line in the court. So, we had a small court. It was a good shot. Any time you got the ball, you were in shooting range.
One thought.
Those 3-pointers, right? Well, the 3-point shot didn't come in until the '88 season, and it's hard to believe that we do without it now, And at the time, I never thought that the 3-point shot would change the game the way it has, and it's been absolutely amazing that what the 3-point shot can do and how teams use it. You watch, of course, the NCAA tournament and how many teams use that shot and make it make it a real weapon. So.
One thought about Hargett Field up here and the upgrade to it a couple years back. We literally, we thought that Hargett had a lot of character. We knew where the dips were. We knew what areas on rainy days would be soggy, and thought that was to our advantage. But honestly, it had gotten to a point where there was some question about the safety of being out on the surface, to the point that opposing coaches would talk to candidates. If you play for us, you'll only have one chance every other year to break your leg playing on Hargett. If you go to Loyola, you'll have that chance every day. And it was certainly overstatement, but it wasn't a terrific surface toward the end. What the surface has done for us here, and we were pretty late to the party, we were still renting space at Stevenson at 8 o'clock at night when we were inundated with rain for days. All the other schools were on theirs. So getting it improved the quality of the games, but what it's meant to us here is the practice availability. You're not going to wear it out. We can go team after team during the course of the day. If it's not lightning, we're playing. This year, we removed snow. Spent one day with shovels getting it down and played on it the next day. Tremendous asset, but having said that, I still miss Old Hargett on a game day. The stands weren't made for sitting. They were made for clumping in groups standing, because they were like this wide. So you had people standing in clusters, and then a couple feet up there'd be 8 more people, and then beyond that. They were so close to the edge of our field that when a ball went out and the opposing team had to restart at the end near the gym and near what's now the stands, our fans literally were hanging over their shoulder, screaming and hollering at them as they were about to restart plays. Incredibly intimidating setting for a team to come up to Blakefield. And opposing coaches would say, man, we just hate playing at your field because your crowd is on top of us. Our kids can't hear us. They get intimidated getting out around the perimeter of the field. And I love the new field for practice. Well, I love playing games on Old Hargett, but you can't have it both ways.
He had the bench in Hargett Field. I could speak for hours about it, and so could Jared. Jared used to mark the field. When I was first here, we had William Walter used to mark the field, but frequently it'd be late in the afternoon and William Walter had maybe been into the schnapps a little bit. Lines weren't always straight. Jerry had to take over. But we had certain favorite spots, and Joe mentioned there's certain clumps. There was one clump of NDP girls that always sat down in the corner, and a lot of times our players were kind of more interested in who was sitting in that corner than what was going on the field. But the most famous spot on the field, there was a big hole at about the 20-yard line on our side of the field, and we thought that the hole was happened because Reggie Boyce hit somebody from Cardinal Gibbons there one time, and it made such a big boom that we think it blew a hole in the field there. It was Lou Eckrell, right?
Yeah, that was Lou Eckrell. That one game that playing Gibbons, and Gibbons was really controlling the game. They were up at the half. I think maybe at least a touchdown. I think the kick, it might have been the opening kickoff for the second half, and Lou Eckrell got it in deep in Calvert Hall territory and ran it back, got down to that area and fell flat in his face. And of course, we were able to hold on, and after that point, we just turned the game around and marched down the field and scored, and that was it. But that was amazing. It was funny, we were out in the golf course with Lou one time, and I said to Tom McMullen, who was the AD over at McDonough, and he was with us, and I said, just ask Lou about that Calvert Hall game that he fell down, and he did, and Lou was no good the rest of the day. He was like all shook. Why didn't you ever tell him about that? You know, so.
In case you don't know, Lou's the athletic director over at Calvert Hall now. But he was, who's friend? Coach Hall's friend? You have a friend over there? Anyway,
Ask Lou about that sometime.
Lou's father came, he was at Loyola. He was an all-Maryland lineman over here in the 40s. And Lou went to Calvert Hall, stayed.
No, Lou went to Gibbons.
Gibbons, I'm sorry, but he went to Calvert Hall as a teacher and athletic director.
Last thing I was, got it.
One more story about Hargett and Field. When I was coaching at the city at that time, and Tracy Merrick was the coach here, and George Roman was the coach at the city. It was a big rivalry, the two best coaches in the city. And George was talking to the team. He said, "Look, don't get yourself upset when you go out there. They're going to play when the Saints go marching in, and they're going to be walking around. The priests are going to be walking around, blessing the field and everything. Just don't get yourself upset." So we go to warm up, and I'm trying to remember who. What? One of our players, he comes up to George and said, "George, Coach, I thought you were kidding us. Look what I just found." And he had a rosary to pick up off the field.
One of the things that the turf fields take away is our old strategy of kicking dirt in the goalie's face. You know, on the old dirt fields, that was, so kick a lot of dust up in front so he can't see the ball. Can't do it anymore.
Well, the last thing I was going to ask you guys before we turn it over to any of you guys who may have questions was just any other characters who stood out? Guys who just cracked you up, or guys who kept you up at night because you were wondering what they were getting into? If you don't want to name names, you don't have to. You can just maybe tell the story and leave the name out. I was just wondering if there were any, when I mentioned that, if that triggers anything with you guys about certain players from the past.
Well, we had a number of great managers, okay, that we had, and one of them, John Kasich, who was graduated, I think, in '75. He eventually went on, was a head trainer with the Seattle Seahawks, and I think now he's a head trainer down in University of South Carolina. I think that's where he is now. But he was with the Seahawks for a number of years. But Mr. Stewart, when he was doing the line, we always had a managers that he groomed. One of, I guess, Renee Gunning.
Yeah, Renee was one. We used to have this thing up there. Let me talk about characters. And, yeah, so many guys on the teams that were just funny and fun to be around. But the managers, a couple I'm going to mention. Renee Gunning was one. We had this thing up there in the back room. We used to call it the sock and jock shop. And Renee was in charge of the sock. He wouldn't let anybody cross the lines. And he would have, what did he have, a Friday morning quarterback club for us? I use the word fastidious. Okay, I mean, for a guy's locker room, I mean, Renee was, everything had to be right. Another guy I had, I see Danny Cahill here, we used to call Moon Baby Cahill. Remember Moon Baby? He was her brother, right? We had nicknames for everybody. Everybody had a nickname, but the Moon would walk around at lacrosse and football practice with a hockey stick. He had Moon Baby written on it. And guys that weren't doing their calisthenics properly, he'd whack them on there, with permission, he'd whack them on the butt. Tell them, better shape up. We had many memorable manager type guys. The players themselves, we had great guys I remember from my time, but Coach?
One more story I got to tell you about Peter Vocal.
His nephew's here. Be careful. Nephew.
Yes, he is. He pleaded with me. He said, look, I got to get ready for lacrosse, and I know I'm not going to, get ready unless I have somebody looking at my shoulder. So can I be on the team? I said, you can be on the team as long as you don't give me a pain in my backside. He said, okay. So we had a bonfire rally before the Calvert Hall game, and Robbie Gillen, who was our quarterback, jumps off the wall along the driveway out there, and not known to me, sprains his ankle. The next day we get down to the stadium, and here comes Gillen, hardly able to walk, has his ankle in, I think it was in the cast. And I said, Vocal, guess who the quarterback is for this game? And John McGinn, who was our longtime coach, used to describe the look on Peter's face when he heard that he was going to be the quarterback for that game. I don't know what the score was. I just know we didn't do too well.
Well, I thank all you gentlemen for your service to the school and all you've done to literally help raise generations of young men. It's definitely appreciated. And any questions you guys have, please just raise your hand. Feel free if you want the mic. I'll bring it to you if you don't need it or whatever.
I got to Loyola in 1969, that was my freshman year. I didn't play sports, but I have a lot of memories about the guys, my teachers, that are here on stage. The one thing, in my freshman year, I can remember being in algebra class with Mr. Stewart. He was an excellent algebra teacher. I learned a lot from him.
Thank you. Do you remember how to find a slope of a line?
Right now, I couldn't tell you. I remember being taught it, though. And as far as Mr. Brune goes, I can remember not being taught by him, but going through the
Johnny Bear.
I thought that was him, not Webster. Is that
Wagner was the quarterbacks in 67 and 68. He graduated in 69.
okay.
And Johnny Bear took over on the 69 team. Matter of fact, there's a great picture of Johnny Bear. As soon as that ball went through the crossbars in the 69 game, somebody snapped a picture of Johnny Bear pulling down on his helmet with a grimace on his face, and somebody snapped it.
Right, and there was another football player, I don't know if anybody's mentioned him, but I remember he seemed to be the biggest guy on the team, as I recall.
Mountain Dew Giddings.
No?
Art Metcalf. He was Art Metcalf, yeah. He went on to Minnesota.
Yeah.
And we had a big guy play with Mike. Mike did Mountain Dew play with. Like I said, we had nicknames for everybody. We called him Mountain Dew. He was I haven't seen him. So last time I heard Mountain Dew, he was slinging hash somewhere, had a ponytail down to his butt. Somebody was telling me about that. Mountain Dew Giddings.
And one final thing about Mr. Korrow. He got here in 1970, as he said, and I was in his class for ancient history, where we studied all the Greeks, Xerxes, and everybody. And that's a very memorable class I had.
Well, thank you. I came here and they told me I was to select my book. Now, I hadn't had Greek and Roman history in quite a while, since Western Civ in college. And certainly one of the things that they do not do in preparation for teachers is to prepare you to select your textbook. So I listened to Father Lenny Martin, fine Jesuit, and he recommended those two books, Cyril E. Robinson, The History of Rome, and The History of Greece. And it had far too many names in it. And I know I was quizzing every day. There was a quiz every day. Come on, let's have a quiz.
See,
You know?
being an expert about it.
Well, my first thing I had you guys do, you may not remember, is you had to do an oral report on the gods. And part of the reason you had to do the oral report on the gods is because the books were 2 weeks late. So I'm saying, with the change in dress code, I was scrambling to make sure that I was keeping ahead of you guys and helping you out in the classroom.
Yeah, I also remember you could go run in the Boston Marathon, right?
Yes, I did. 1971, we raised money for the mission for Father Gaidara over in India, with people pledging to see if I would finish, how many miles I would finish. I'm still running a little bit.
Billy Korrow run's coming up in May, so if all of you can make it out to that, May the 4th. It's a great, great family fun day in the morning here. The run and lots of prizes if you can make it, it's really worthwhile. Which is number 20? 21.
John, you mentioned Tracy Mayer that you played for.
Yeah.
He was after when I was here.
Tracy was here today. He spent time with me today in my office. He has a grandson here. Tracy Mayer was a football coach here at 57. He said to me today, he said, "Hey John, do you remember that 7-7 win that Loyola had in 1957? And I said, I remember well. It was a tie ball game, but he still talks about that game. Heavily favored. As a George Young coach team that had Jerry Gray went on to play at Notre Dame, and Tracy was reliving that game for me today. He was in my office. He has a grandson here. Yeah.
I'd like to relive one game, which was the first football game that Mr. Brune and Mr. Stewart coached at Loyola in 1967. And Creedy was on that team, and Vince Fitzpatrick was on that team, anybody else. So, Mr. Brune wanted to play tough teams. Opening game, his first game back at Loyola High School, he schedules Bel Air. those days, there was no Falston, there was no North Hartford. C. Milton Wright was a teacher in the system, not a school. It was either, you went, if you lived in Harford County, you either went to Edgewood, Aberdeen, Havre de Grace, or Bel Air. Got everybody else. And they called them the farm boys, because they threw 50-pound bales of hay all summer, and then they went to play football for Bel Air. Bel Air was the king of Harford County. He picks them for our first game. So we had the summer practice, sort of like the Bear Bryant, Alabama type of summer practice. But we didn't go out to the woods of Alabama like they did. We did it up behind the gym. Creedy can tell you about all that. But anyway, game was going to be the big game on a Saturday. The remnants of the hurricane came through early September, as they sometimes do. We come up Saturday for the game, all psyched up. Mr. Stewart greets us coming up to the gym. Game's postponed. Come back tomorrow. Be here by 11 o'clock. Coat and tie. It's going to be Sunday. We're going to have Mass before the game as a theme. Okay. So we show up Sunday, the day after. It's one of those hot, humid days you get the day after a hurricane. Coat and ties. We go to Mass. We didn't have a cathedral chapel like you have now. Up above the library, there was a small chapel. You could barely fit the 30 guys in there. Who's saying Mass? Father Schmidt, if anybody knows him. You guys remember. Which, theoretically, we knew he was a priest, but to walk in and see Father Schmidt saying Mass was a shock to the system. He does the Mass, we're all standing, no place to sit. We get out there, we go to the game. Halftime, we're winning 20-0. I don't know how to this day, we're winning 20-0. Bel Air comes back, and they beat us 21-20. This is Mr. Brune's first game back at the alma mater. But before the game, in the locker room, after the warm-ups, we get together. We already had Mass. Warmed up. Okay, boys, take a knee. Let's say a prayer. Let's say a prayer that nobody gets hurt. Okay. Say the Our Father. We lose that game after being up 20-0 in the half. So that next week, well, the verdict was in. You guys aren't in shape. That week of practice was very, very intense, condition-wise. So we come to the next game. I think it was at Edmonton or somewhere. We do the warm-ups, come in the locker room right before the game. Okay, boys, take a knee. We're going to say a prayer. And, what are we praying for this week? That we don't blow the game again? Nope. Let's say a prayer that nobody gets hurt. So by the end of the season, it was just, okay, boys, take a knee. And we knew what we were praying for. That nobody got hurt. Not that we won, not that we didn't blow it when we did any of that. So the next year I played, it was the same thing every game, what we prayed for. That nobody got hurt. So I went away to school, I came back, and I was one of these guys, like a bunch of you probably, came back and did a little coaching. This is about 4 or 5 or 6 years later. I was coaching the freshman football team, and at the end of the season, I got to be up with the varsity for the last couple of weeks and help out. So I'm in the stadium, in the locker room for the varsity game. This is like 8 years after I played. I hadn't been in the locker room for a game since my playing days. 8 years later, down at Memorial Stadium. Okay, boys, take a knee, say a prayer. Same thing. Nobody got hurt. Not that we kicked Calvert Hall's ass, just that nobody got hurt. And some years later, I read a book, Creedy's old school, Notre Dame, and they were talking to some of the players. And after Arab Pasegian was gone. Dan Devine, I think, had gotten sick. They got this guy from a Catholic school in Cincinnati, who was 60-0 in Cincinnati from Muller High. He came to coach the Fighting Irish. And in this book on Irish football, there's a quote by one of the linemen. They were in a game, and it was a tight situation. And that coach, the big 60-0 guy from Muller High, now Notre Dame, great Catholic football school. He turned to the guys on the bench and said, "Say a Hail Mary that this guy kicks that field goal." And I read that book and I said, we are all so lucky we went to this school where they prayed for the right thing. We never prayed to win a game, to score a touchdown or kick a point. Nobody got hurt. And thank God in those days it didn't happen. So when you see that Loyola Blakefield Jesuit education since 1852, that's what I think about more than the ones we won and the ones we didn't win. So that's all.
Mr. Cahill.
I'm going to talk about the time that I was here, some guys that I watched play, specifically with football with Joe. We talked a lot about how undersized we were at times. I was here when a guy arrived named Chris Luther, and he played for us, and I think went on to play in Delaware, but at the time, was clearly the largest football player that had ever, I think, played here. But around that era was John Hawes and Drew Eichelberger and Andre Saunders. And I remember being a freshman, and that team ended up beating Calvert Hall. And I'd just like you to talk about Bernie Bowers was quarterback of that team. And coaching that team, John Lowowitz was on. I can tell you as a freshman, what an uplifting thing that was for this school to have that team play the way they did. I'd just like you to comment on a couple of players on that team.
Let me give this to Joe, but that was a team that wore the nicknames on the back of their jerseys. They were a loose bunch.
Yeah, I really got some of my best friends are from Calvert Hall, and they really let me hear after Brent, your friend, had ice on the back of his
Bernie
jersey.
Bowers.
Ice. Bernie Bowers. I'm trying to remember now.
It was 30 to 8 or something like that. But Jay, it would be like 30 to 8 or 30 to 12 or something like that.
Who was the quarterback of that team?
Bernie Bowers. Bernie
Yeah,
Bowers.
yeah.
Bernie Bowers is one of the few guys that Joe let drop back to pass the ball. Right? Joe had sprint out right, sprint out left. But
I will share this. I was on the freshman team, I believe, and you allowed a pit drill to take place with two of the best hitters on the varsity team. It was Andre Saunders and I think John Hawes. And they hit one another, and I think half the freshman guys said, I don't want to play football.
Joe used to give us cards before practice, okay, and tell us, it was, first off, it was Jack Hubbard and I were helping coach, and then Father McDonald, but he would give us cards at the beginning of every practice, index cards, right? I had to burn them all, okay? I couldn't tell you what was on those cards, telling us what to do, where to go. Creamy's name was on a lot of them, you know? But here's Joe.
that was 30 to 12, I think.
Yeah.
Bernie Bowers was seen 77.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that was, we scored down at the end of, open end of the stadium at the end of that game, did we?
Lowowitz scored on the way back.
But you know, out at practice was a lot of fun when you had somebody like John Hawes.
Okay, because, John did whatever he asked him to do. But we loved it. Right? And we'd have tackling drills every day. And John would be in line, and the other guys are looking positive. And there wouldn't be.
When we had lacrosse drills, we'd line up the defense on one line and tackers on the other, and I could see the attackers counting. He'd go, 1, 2, I want to be number 3 or number 5. He had a big wooden stick that he'd beat on guys with, full tilt of practice. So that's the kind of player he was in football. He was a safety, and was he? Tight end. And in lacrosse, he was a defender.
That was kind of interesting. You mentioned like the Hawes family. We had 3 of them here, and the father had been a really good player here, and then the Welsh's. And I mean, I think today, guys, today they might say, well, who's going to give me a scholarship? I don't care if my brother went there or my uncle went there. Where am I going to get a scholarship? Those families really did hold things together here for a long while.
Just in case you know the family, I don't want to ignore Timmy Hawes and Mike Hawes. They didn't get the press that the other 3 did. John, Tommy, and Kevin were the monsters. Timmy and Mike also attended. So if you go home and talk to the Hawes family, all 5 were acknowledged.
And up there, Mr. Vocal, we have a number of vocals here in the 70s and 80s too, that family that contributed quite a bit to our legacy here.
I can add one.
Starting with Emmett. Emmett was on the lacrosse and football teams. He was probably about 160 pounds when he was here.
What was his nickname?
Bristle. We used to call him Bristle because he bristled at everything. He still does, doesn't he? No comment on my father. We used to call him Bristle.
One was Green and the other
Yeah, Green was about 160 pounds probably.
Put the 2 of them together, they didn't weigh 200 pounds.
Right. Thin but tough.
One thought I had about John, I mentioned that I was selling sporting goods for the Triangle Company at the time. And Joe called me up and he said, I got this kid on the team and he keeps knocking himself out. He hit so hard. And I think you all were playing in Rawlings helmets, maybe a couple Rydells, and the bike had come out with the inflated one. You stuck a little needle in the top of it and pumped it up. Well, none of the high schools had them, but Towson did. So I went over to Towson University and asked them if I could get one of their helmets. These guys painted it up Loyola colors, put it on his head, pumped it up, and I think that kind of took care of the concussion problem. His didn't come from receiving hits, his concussions came from delivering hits.
He probably would have been out several weeks now.
Right.
He might have had a concussion.
I think I was fortunate enough to play for 3 of you up there at the table. I played football and basketball when I was here. I was always afraid to play lacrosse. Something about people hitting me with sticks that didn't sit well with me. But I just want to tell a quick story of something that I learned from the 3 of you. I didn't know about Loyola until 1991 or 92. My godfather was a long-time Baltimore City football coach, and happened to be holding the chains at the game where Forest Park was playing against Loyola. We were on the Loyola sideline, and I can remember looking around, seeing these guys, and they had these 2 massive linemen, Dave Bright and Joe Lombardi. And I mean, the pants on these guys were huge, just huge pants. That's really the first memory that I have of Loyola. And a couple years later, I was again fortunate enough to attend the school and play for some of the best coaches in the state at that time. But now, Mr. Korrow story, we talked about not having trainers. The first time I got hurt, I was a freshman, something was wrong with my foot. And they're like, well, go see Mr. Korrow, he'll take care of it. So I go see Mr. Korrow, something's wrong with my foot. Normally
I was used to just getting like a bag of ice, putting your hand on it, putting it on your arm or something. Well, he pulls out this bucket and he fills it with ice and he puts water in it and he says, put your foot in that for 20 minutes. That's the worst pain I've ever felt. The moral of that story for me was don't get hurt and don't miss practice. I never wanted to see Mr. Korrow again. My sophomore year, playing basketball, and I didn't really know Coach Savage that well yet, and I was having some issues with my jump shot. One practice, I go up to Coach Savage and say, Coach, can you watch me shoot and tell me what I'm doing wrong? So I shoot a jump shot, I miss it, give me the ball, let me shoot it. I watched him shoot probably 25 to 30 3-pointers without missing. Lesson of the story, don't give Jerry Savage the ball if you want to learn how to shoot. I mean, it was perfect. I've never seen a guy shoot the ball that well. Never missed. And then Coach Brune, I got thousands of stories to tell about you, but I'll tell the one that I think I learned the biggest lesson from, and that's that there are no stars on any team. My senior year, I'd already started for 2 years, thought I was a pretty good player, maybe the best on the team, who knows? But we're running and we have a mile test before practice. Every summer you got to pass the mile test before you do practice. I'm not running a mile. I don't like running miles now, and I did it when I was 17, 18 years old. So we had to do it in 6 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm not doing it. I ran it, 7:30, 7:45. He'll forget about it. He'll just let me start practice. He said, no, you're going to run this mile until you pass that test. You're going to be like the rest of the guys on the team. And it took probably 4 or 5 times for me to run it and finally get 6:30. So I certainly appreciate all of what you guys taught me and the example that you were for me, not only as coaches, as teachers, but also as a father and a parent and a husband. So appreciate you all. I love you. Thank you.
Coach Hall only had one jug in his whole time here. The last day of his last year. I had to get him.
Chuck Taylor.
Anybody else, guys? I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to mingle with the coaches as well before we have to clear out. So if nobody has any other questions. I just want to say thanks so much for coming out tonight. Jason, thank you very much for coming out. Give Jason a little round of applause.
I just want to say one other thing. I don't think I would be a part of this at all if not for the education I got at Loyola and people who really helped instill and reinstill my love of writing. Doc Fitz, if I didn't take his AP Comp class, there's no doubt in my mind I wouldn't have been writing for a newspaper straight out of college. And it started my mind thinking about what good writing was and how to convey information. And I also took a creative writing class with Coach Brune the year before. And both those classes resonate more deeply with me than anything I did in college at Syracuse or any communication school or anything like that. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. And thank both you guys for everything you did for me.
Thanks very much, everybody. I just want to close by saying, under the leadership of Mr. Day here, we're really trying to do some new and creative things with how we re-engage our alums. So I hope this was something you guys enjoyed tonight. I know I did, hearing from these guys. If you have any other ideas or ways that you think you want to get involved or want to be engaged, or events that you'd like to see, please let me know. Again, my name's Pat Booth. I'm the new Alumni Relations Director here, and we'd love to hear it. In closing, before we mingle, I have one Coach Brune story that I can't go without telling. It's my senior year. Brant had just graduated. Brant was being a little modest. He was Player of the Year. Player of the year before. So it's spring ball. I'm a junior, about to be a senior. My younger brother, who was still about 70 pounds heavier than I am, was a sophomore coming out of JV. So all the teams practice together. Coach Brune has the starting offense in the huddle, and we're showing the guys huddle procedure and all that stuff. And he calls a play, and I run out. It was a wide receiver, run out, line up. And my brother Peter was apparently mouthing off or doing something in the back, and he goes, "Move!" He yells at everybody. Turn around and say, "Yes, sir." He goes, in front of every football player at Loyola. Not Pat Muth, fat move. So my brother never, ever again was out of line at practice, as you might imagine. So anyway, I couldn't let that one go. But again, guys, thanks so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys tomorrow.